What's your name and preferred pronouns?
My name is Camilla, and I use she, her pronouns.
Okay. Do you identify with a specific race?
I personally, that's a very loaded question for me because, so I'm Latina, which is not a race, it's an ethnicity. And people from Latin America and like Hispanic people can be a multitude of races. They can be indigenous, they can be white, they can be black, and those all exist within my family. So racial identity is something that's difficult for me to navigate personally. Do I identify as a person of color? Yes. But I don't consider myself like one specific race.
Yeah. Were you ever exposed to American history that wasn't taught through the white narrative that majority of school systems teach?
I was grateful enough, or sorry, that's not the word. I was fortunate enough to have had educators who tried to teach things that weren't through a white lens, but I had to go out of my way to find those opportunities, or I had to take a specific class to learn about my own history or like someone else's. And so the majority of my history, the way it was taught to me throughout school, was very, okay, we're going to talk about this, and here's a day on the civil rights movement, and then here's a day on some other minority groups' struggles in America. And it was kind of like a thing that you would brush the topic and then you would like move on. So I don't really feel like I was adequately taught just how diverse our history is, with America specifically, sorry.
How important do you think it is to be exposed to a variety of history, or more specifically American history?
So with American history, that's like a complicated topic because American history is largely Black history, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. And while, you know, like obviously like the Latinx experience and like the Asian experience and all those experiences are equally important in America, a lot of American, like literally like the foundations of every American institution came out of like this racial divide between like Black people and white people. And so I really think that Black history like is American history, and that it's something that should be taught in schools. And I think it's especially important for children to be raised knowing how they got here and like why they're here and how they can contribute to the world. Because there's this erasure of people of color in history, and it perpetuates like this idea that people of color are inferior, that they don't contribute to society, which is absolutely not true. So I think it's really important to have diversity in education, and yeah.
Do you think there should be a required core class in every college in America that is put in place in order to expose students to a non-white American history?
I think there should definitely be some type of like cultural sensitivity. I don't want to say training, but something that in place on college campuses where people can, because you have people coming from many different walks of life. Like I had someone in a class who thought it was offensive to use the word Black and they're a white person, and that's what they were raised to believe, because they lived in a white town, and white people thought that saying the word Black was offensive. And so I think there should be something. So we had like a diversity EDU situation, and it wasn't really quite adequate. So I think colleges and universities like need to work with their students of color and that population and their underrepresented students to formulate something that can work in a college setting, to educate people on, you know, like other people's issues. And I think they need to start trying to create conversations about that, because I don't know if necessarily like a crash course is like the right method of doing that, because we've kind of seen how that didn't really work well with diversity EDU. But I definitely think there needs to be like a space for conversation and opportunities where people can interact with each other and talk to each other about these things without feeling unsafe or feeling threatened. Like I want people to leave feeling better than they came in, or at least more enlightened than they came in.
Do you think it's the responsibility of white parents to discuss race with their kids before going into a diverse college setting?
I think it's the responsibility of white parents, any parent, any human being in general, if you have a child that you bring into the world or that you pluck from somewhere else and bring into your home, that you need to talk to your children about these things, because they're, especially if you are American, and you don't live in like a racially homogeneous like society. Sorry, homogeneous, my bad. Come at me, bio majors. No, I'm sorry. Then you definitely need to have those conversations with them. I certainly don't think that, like, I don't think it's like necessarily, because like going back to the previous question, I don't think it's like the college's responsibility to pick up where you left. I think and like there have been countless studies that have shown that like of white parents and children, that children who are raised with white parents who don't talk about race, even if they don't say anything negative racially about people, if they don't talk about race at all, they end up having negative racial stereotypes and perceptions more than children who are raised talking about race in the home, because our society is so pro-white. Your children are going to get those ideas no matter where you go. So if you don't constantly try and go against everything negative that our society is telling them about people of color, then that's going to become their mentality. And you do not want that to happen, because we want to be like a great harmonious society and kumbaya and just love and happiness.
Do you think it's the responsibility of SMCM to discuss race with incoming students, more specifically white students?
So I think it's definitely the college's responsibility to create a racially accepting climate. You need to have a system in place where if someone is experiencing racial harassment, they can go and report that, they can be believed, and disciplinary action will be taken as swiftly as possible. And you need to create a climate where people who are actively discriminatory feel like it's not okay to do that. Because people feel like they can get away with a lot on this campus, and if you are ignoring something, you're just exacerbating the problem. And so I definitely think that St. Mary's needs to make it important. They need to make it a priority to try to eradicate the racism on this campus. And especially because of the area that we're in, that's a little hard. But St. Mary's could be like, it has the potential to be so many great things and to have an effect on the community as a whole. But it's just not really doing that right now. And they need to hire more people who are committed to diversity in all forms, not just uplifting people of color, but uplifting people with disabilities and LGBTQ people. And I think that they're very much of the mentality of like, oh, if we hire a black person or a person of color, therefore we are diverse and therefore we are doing enough. And that is just not true.
Is it the responsibility of St. Mary's to have a diverse academic staff?
Absolutely, because the fields of study here are so different, and your staff needs to reflect that. And you are preparing students to enter the real world. And the real world does not look like all one thing. The real world is many different things. And so you should try as best as you can to simulate that worldly experience for your students. Like, it's called higher education for a reason. Like, I don't want to come here and be subjected to the same things that I've been subjected to my whole life. I'm coming here to expand my knowledge and expand my mind and be exposed to so many other different things. And I feel like you're doing a disservice to your students, especially your white students who don't have this extra experience of growing up with like a different cultural perspective, if you don't have a diverse faculty.
Do you think diversity is an important aspect to students' college experiences?
I think it's definitely an important aspect to students' college experiences. I heard a lot of stories of people who were like, I never saw a person of color until I went to college. College is like the place where you go to become enlightened and become a better member of society and to use the knowledge that you've gained to contribute to your community. And so I think that diversity is a really huge part of that, because you cannot go your whole life just ignoring that people that are different from you exist. And we don't want to cultivate ignorance. And I think that if the college prides itself on being diverse, it really needs to show that. And you will be like robbing students of an education if you don't try and provide as much of a diverse experience as possible.
That's all.
All right.